Hi and welcome to the JP-8000 8080 video. My name is David Wells and may I say you have some excellent taste in keyboards. What a wonderful pair of synthesizers these guys are. I read in an article the other day that a journalist called these the most powerful synths of all time. I got to agree with that. I mean, there's so many keyboards out there at the moment that are based on sampled waveforms. They're very realistic and you've probably got a whole bunch in your studio. But frankly, I'm sick of the sounds. You turn on the radio and everybody sounds the same. Where these guys have really thick, fat synth sounds that'll really separate you from the pack. All you have to do is take one look at the front panel of these guys to realize that Roland really wants you to get your fingers dirty and tweak these sounds. You pretty well have a dedicated knob or slider for everything you do, and we're going to explore all of them in this video. Now you'll notice that this video is a combination between the JP-8000 and the 8080 because there's a great deal of overlap between the two. But what we'll do in this video is we'll start out learning everything there is to know about the JP-8000, and then the remainder of the video will go over just the special features that are different in the JP-8080. In fact, while we're here, let's quickly go over the differences now. The 8080 has all of the features of the 8000 with the addition of the following. First up, polyphony, or how many voices you can get to play at the same time. The 8000 has 8 voices and they were able to squeeze 2 more out of the 8080 for a total of 10. They've also added a unison mode on the 8080 which allows you to stack all 10 voices on one key for a really fat sound. Now, one really great improvement on the 8080 is that you can now use an external input for all sorts of vocoder and robot voice effects, and also morphing. This is a really powerful feature. You can also use these external inputs as sources for your oscillators. Distortion has been added to the effects section, and noise has been added as a source for oscillator 2. It's kind of funny that improvements now include distortion and noise. That used to be a bad thing, right? Well, obviously not. This is a good distortion and good news. You know what I mean. Anyway, you probably might think I've left out the obvious fact that the 8080 has no keyboard, but if you look closely, it actually does. If you hold down preview, you can use the patch and bank buttons to actually play the keyboard. I wouldn't suggest you do your composing this way, but it's a great way to preview sounds when there isn't a keyboard around the place. Now, I urge you to use the index card with this tape. I don't expect you to watch this tape from start to end, but rather taking it a little bit at a time, just find the subjects that you need to go over and go to the corresponding counter location. It's a great way to brush up on any subjects you're not quite clear on. Anyway, without any further ado, let's look at the front panel of the JP-8000. The panel of the JP-8000 is sectioned off into areas that deal with certain synthesizer functions, such as oscillators, filter, amp, and effects. However, most of your work will be done right here in this area, selecting sounds and also editing some of the global parameters. From here, we can select any one of the 64 user and preset performances and 128 user and preset patches, and the presets always stay within the machine. Basically, the user memory is the area where we can save all our tweaks, and you'll notice that when you get the machine straight out of the box, that the user memory is nothing more than a copy of the preset memory. So as you start customizing the user area, you can write as many patches there, safe in the knowledge that those original sounds are safe back in preset land. Let's look at the portion of the panel marked key and panel. You'll see that there are 3 modes that the keyboard can be in at any time: single, dual, or split. Single allows you to play just one patch at a time right across the keyboard, where dual will stack 2 patches on top of each other for nice fat sound. Keep in mind this will halve your polyphony because as you're stacking them on top of each other, you're using twice the amount of voices. And split will have one sound, or one patch on your left hand, another on your right hand. Let's quickly explain the differences between patches and performances. Now a patch is basically a sound that is made up of all of the settings of the knobs and sliders on the front panel, and the JP-8000 can play two different patches at the same time. It basically has two synth engines inside it. Roland calls this the upper part and the lower part. For example, the upper part could be playing, say, a horn patch, and the lower part could be playing, say, a string sound. And depending on what key mode you're in, you can play just one patch at a time, single mode. We can then select which part of the JP that we want to play, either upper or lower. Now, if we select dual, we can stack both sounds on top of each other. If we select split, then we have our lower part on our left hand and the upper part on our right. Now, if we ever want to tweak either of these patches, either on the lower or upper part, we first need to select which part to edit. So you can think of the JP-8000 as basically being two synths in one. Each can play a different patch. So that means that all the knobs and sliders on the front panel here can either be associated with the upper part or the lower part, depending on which panel select button you choose. That means that each of these parts has their own oscillators, filters, amps, and even effects. You won't find that on a lot of synthesizers. Quite often, synths that allow you to stack different patches, they share effects. Not so with these guys. They have independent effects. Anyway, let's select some patches. Just to the left of the display, we have a button marked Performance/Patch. This button toggles between, you probably guessed it by now, performances and patches. Let's select Patch, and from here we can select, by using the bank value buttons down and up, any one of the 16 user and 16 preset banks of 8 patches. They're organized in this way. We have user A, 8 banks, then user B, another 8 banks, so a total of 16 banks, and then preset A, 8 banks here, and 8 more banks here. Once we select this bank, you can then select the patch within that bank by hitting one of the 8 corresponding buttons. Now do the math and you'll have 16 banks of 8 patches, which gives you 128 patches in both the preset area and the user programmable area. Selecting performances is just the same. Hit Performance Patch so that we are now dealing with performances, and select the banks you want to use. We have 8 user and 8 presets. This gives you a total of 64 performances in each of the user and the preset areas. Now you'll notice a difference in the way that the key mode works depending on whether you are selecting patches or performances. If you're selecting patches, you'll notice that the key mode never changes. Never changes. We can go through here. But if we're in performances, the key mode will change. This is because when you're playing patches, you're free to select the key mode first. If you just want to play a single patch, then you can go into key mode here and select single, and actually it doesn't really matter which of the panel selects you hit. If you hit dual mode, then we're free to select the patches you want to stack. We have our lower panel here, which brings up this particular patch. Let's experiment with some other patches on our upper here. Kind of sounds neat. So if you just want to manually match up the patches you either want to stack in dual mode or split, you can do that right here. But what happens if you come across a set of patches that when you stack them together is just the perfect sound, or maybe you've got a great split with the perfect bass on your left hand and the perfect lead on your right hand? You'll want to record that, and that's what performances are all about. A performance will record what patch is assigned to which part, where your split point is, and basically all the other housekeeping that needs to be done. That's why the key mode changes with every performance you select. Roland comes up with the best combination of patches arranged in either stacks, that's the dual mode here, or splits. So to recap, the JP-8000 can be in either one of two modes, either patch mode or performance mode. We can think of the JP as being two independent synthesizers inside this one case here, and you can decide which one you're going to deal with by using the panel select buttons. Now once you've decided which one of these parts you're going to deal with, either lower or upper, you can then use the knobs and sliders on the front panel to modify that patch that is assigned to that part. One last thing before we get into editing the sounds is just to the right of the screen is a shift key that when pressed and held down will get you into some of the screens that correspond with the labels in the black legend here just above the 8 buttons. Once pressed, you can cycle through these screens by just hitting the corresponding buttons. So for example, button 4 here will get me through all the various MIDI functions. Once you get to the screen that you want to change, you can do so by using the up and down buttons. If you need to get out of these screens, just hit exit. So now we know the basic architecture of the JP-8000 and we know how to select patches and performances. Let's get busy and tweak some sounds. So, how do synthesizers work? Well, in order to tackle this, we should probably go over the 3 basic characteristics that make up the sound that we hear. That is pitch, timbre, and amplitude. If I was to sing, say, a note like ooh, we could describe what pitch that was, what the timbre or the tone of that sound was, and also how loud it was. Now that was a fairly boring sound. Those characteristics really didn't change over time, but I could change them over time. I could change the pitch, ooh, could change the timbre, wow, 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 or I could change the amplitude, ooh. Those are examples of those 3 characteristics changing over time, and that's really what a lot of synthesizers do. Let's relate that example to the JP-8000. Let's go into our patches and we'll select user B87, I believe, template 1, and we'll actually take some effect off that sound, so we're left with a fairly basic synth sound. You'll notice that right across the front panel you'll see certain areas sectioned off that have labels like oscillator 1, oscillator 2, filter, and so on. All of the knobs and buttons within that particular area are related to that particular part of the synthesizer. So let's first understand what these sections do to the sound, and then we can break it down further. When you or I sing, we move air through our vocal cords, making them vibrate, and through those vibrations we make sound. Now these guys here don't have vocal cords, but they do have oscillators. Actually, if you really want to be picky, they have DSPs that model those older analog oscillators, but let's just get to the basics for now.